Darren Waller is a straight-up baller. 200 yards and 2 TDs, our 2020 bold prediction coming true. If you own him, what do you expect in 2021? If you've got him in Dynasty, is this guy the next Kelsey? Will he be drafted right after Kelsey? Will he be drafted before George Kittle in 2021 redraft? But what about Dynasty? What do we do with him? And speaking of Dynasty, where do we rank Alvin Kamara? Everybody and their mother having knee-jerk reactions to how he's utilized with Taysom Hill under center. And rightly so. We need to evaluate it. There is a pattern of him not being past the football. But are people overreacting to an extreme degree? Do we bench him in week 13, Smitty? Do I bench him in week 14, Smitty? For garbage type alternatives? The answer to that, I'll tell you right now, is no. But how worried are we about the remainder of 2020? And not just, okay, Drew Brees comes back in week 15, let's say, he'll bounce back. But what if Drew Brees retires? Without Drew Brees, how valuable is Alvin Kamara? Whether it's Taysom Hill or another quarterback, is Alvin Kamara dependent on Drew Brees? We're going to cover all of that and more, including Dynasty 2021 talk. All of that and more coming up. The Fantasy Football Show begins now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty. Take a lap.
So Darren Waller, the baller who made your team about 6 feet taller in week 13, dropped 200 yards and 2 TDs. The question is, heading into 2021, let's talk about redraft first, and then let's hit it from a dynasty perspective. But from a redraft perspective, is he number 2? Let me back up 1 second, because the Kittle owners or the Kittle believers are about to lose their mind. Kittle is the number 2, if not, you could argue the number 1 tight end in the league talent-wise, but he has a long injury history, a playing style that is going to continue to lead to injuries, and I don't have confidence very much at all that he would stay healthy for many seasons in a row, if even one season for 16 games. I don't see it in the cards for Kittle. I'm not saying Waller is going to be a guy that stays healthy for 3 or 4 years straight playing 16 games, but you have to ask yourself at this point, is Waller now the number 2 tight end? Or do we take Kittle, Waller, and all those tight ends right in that group, put them in the same bucket, and turn on the blender? I'm leaning Waller. I'm leaning Waller right now. Now, I liked him heading into 2021. Find somebody that had higher projections and bold predictions than I did. I love Waller. So I'm going to be the guy probably ranking him number 2 walking into 2021. I don't know that I'm going to rank him anywhere near Travis Kelce. So then you got to ask yourself, well, you're getting more time out of Waller, or are you even getting more time out of Waller? At 31 and 28, it's not that big of a difference. I think Waller's the only guy that can compete with Kelce. And even in Dynasty, I'd say Kelce still has 3rd round potential, because in a Dynasty startup, because he's that dominant. And 1 to 2 years is a long time. People playing too far out in advance are always playing for second place. In Dynasty, keep that in mind when you try trading a 27-year-old for a 25-year-old. It's a little early to start talking about exactly where we place Waller. Much will depend on his finish. If he finishes on a tear on the way out the door of 2020, then we might be ranking him in the 3rd or 4th round. But for right now, let's back off the hype a little bit and put him in a safe place, at least a round or 2 behind Travis Kelce heading into 2021 redraft, and we can reevaluate once we get a feel for how he's going to finish out the year. I can't tell you how many questions I got on Alvin Kamara heading into week 13.
Smitty, should I start Matt Murray? Smitty, should I start Frank Gore?
Smitty, should I start this scrub or that scrub? And I get it that the reception totals haven't been there for Kamara since Taysom Hill has been under center, but we saw signs of life from Kamara on the ground, at least, and he did get the touchdown. He looked electric at times. He just isn't getting the football thrown his way. It is a concern. It does dial back my expectation in terms of ranking him go forward at 1, 2, or 3. But if you're talking about moving him from the 6 to 10 range on down outside of the 1st round, you're kind of out of your mind at this point. And it happens to us all. We get into weeks 14, 15, 16, we start getting cute, we start overthinking it. Kamara got you here. Don't bail on him as he's getting used to his place in a Taysom Hill-led offense. He clearly improved from the week prior to this week. Give him a chance. Don't start talking crazy heading into the weeks that matter most. Now, in terms of Dynasty, there's a really good shot that Drew Brees doesn't play football in 2021. Taysom Hill, if he finishes well, will most likely be the starter. So it's a good question to ask. If Kamara is more limited in a Taysom Hill-led attack, does he hold top 4 overall value moving forward? Maybe he doesn't, but you can only bump him down so far because of limitations in the receiving game. He's still a very electric runner, and we don't know if Taysom Hill's going to be the starter all year in 2021, if he even starts at all, if Drew Brees even retires, if Taysom Hill even makes it out of weeks 14 through 16 as a starter. Maybe he gets hurt. Taysom Hill's a running quarterback. Running quarterbacks don't have a long shelf life in the NFL, especially one that runs aggressively like Taysom Hill. I'm not trying to say Taysom Hill doesn't have good dynasty appeal. In fact, he does. In fact, he has a lot of appeal. If Taysom Hill finishes really strong from here on out, he definitely will have a shot at starting for the Saints in 2021. But a lot of unknowns are at play here. And in Dynasty, I maybe take advantage of that if the price is right, like if someone's trying to sell him at rock bottom first round value. But I don't have a knee-jerk reaction. Would I trade laterally into a safer player? Would I maybe downgrade into a J-Rob and buy a wide receiver on the cheap on top of getting J-Rob? I might get crafty and trade out of Alvin Kamara, much like I'd do that maybe with Dalvin Cook, who I worry about staying healthy for the long run. But we're talking about buying like Calvin Ridley type wide receiver value with my J-Rob, and you might not be able to do that anymore. I've been talking about going and getting Calvin Ridley before his value climbed, like it probably did after his week 13 outing. You still may be able to get him cheaper than you should because he didn't score a touchdown, and we're a greedy people, us fantasy football owners. We want that touchdown and 100 yards. So maybe getting 100 yards, no TDs, maybe he still is attainable, but like I said weeks ago when I told you to go get him, his value will steadily increase as people remember that he is a top 1 to 5 wide receiver going forward in Dynasty. But I bring up his name because you can still get undervalued players like that before they rebound. Look at Mike Thomas. I venture to say you could get a really, really good underrated running back and Mike Thomas for Kamara or for Dalvin Cook. Maybe you go get a Clyde Edwards-Helaire in Dynasty and you get a Mike Thomas with it. Coming out of a no-show due to an illness, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to have very, very good trade value heading into week 14 and beyond. So if you're in a Dynasty league that allows trading year-round, you could get some good 2020 value weeks 14 through 16 by buying super low on Clyde. But I think for the long term, Clyde's a great buy low now. Mix in a wide receiver. Maybe you get Mike Thomas. Acquire both of them for Dalvin Cook. Now, Kamara won't get you as much as Dalvin Cook might get you because Kamara's currently in a decline. But I test the waters if you can get that kind of combination of two players for your Kamara. Elliott. I go get Zeke Elliott in Dynasty as well. I truly believe he has at least 2 or 3 good years left. I think Dak will be back in Dallas in 2021. Things will get figured out and the team will, even if they don't win championships, they're going to be a good football team offensively. And Elliott, I think, will eat again. And even if he disappoints a little bit again moving forward and he never rebounds to the top 1 to 3 running back potential that he once held, I certainly think Zeke could earn his keep if you go acquire him at value that I'm currently looking at right now across the board. Dynasty redraft doesn't matter. The value in trading this late in the year, especially in Dynasty, a lot of this content is for you Dynasty owners, but I talk about it in redraft and Dynasty perspective so that you can prepare for both. Or for weeks 14 through 16, a lot of this information applies to that. But I don't think Elliott's going to finish on a tear. Even if he bounces back one game, I think he probably plays mediocre the next game. Elliott will most likely walk into 2021 with all the risk baked into his value, trade or draft. But if you're looking to rebuild, if you're honest with yourself and your team doesn't have what it takes to win now, but you have an elite player like Kamara or Cook or Derrick Henry, now's the time to strike
and get an Elliott and wide receiver, an Elliott and a huge QB upgrade, or a really high draft pick swap where you go from like number 3 to number 1, or you can get multiple first rounders from a very eager person that wants to win now. You can get Elliott from them in a dynasty league where sometimes those leagues allow you for trading year round. You get Elliott in exchange for your exploding Aaron Jones, and you get a first rounder out of it.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty.